Hello everyone, Alistair Gold here. I should be really speaking to you right now after a week that's brought another 3 victories to make it 4 in a row. Obviously the cancelled game against Leyton Orient as well. And for me yesterday, the best performance of the Jose Mourinho era at Tottenham. However, it's Tottenham Hotspur, so that's not what we're talking about. Because fates will conspire, bizarre things will happen, and just the world will ensure that Tottenham Hotspur do not come away with what they deserve. It was a mad game, absolutely mad game. I mean, I last did a video, was it 7-8 days ago? So since then we've had the Southampton win, which after a ropey first half was a fantastic second half performance. 5-2, 4 goals for Son and 1 for Kane. Then we had the Orient cancellation, which I do think was incredibly unfortunate for Leyton Orient. They actually did what they were meant to do and got the testing, got Spurs offered to pay for it. They did it, and actually they were penalised for doing it because they had so many players with COVID-19. So I did feel sorry for them, and Mourinho said that as well. He feels incredibly sorry for them that the game should have been played. And then Skriniar, straight off, minute in, and I can't pronounce something. Anyone who watches videos knows that that's a common theme. Skriniar, that's what I'm going to go for. 3-1 victory, Eric Lamela, Son and Kane all on the score sheet. Good week. And then yesterday for me, I'd say probably the best performance. Leicester was an excellent performance towards the end of last season. Arsenal was very tactically disciplined that game, obviously to beat Man City as well. But for me yesterday, in terms of utter domination and playing really lovely football, creating chances galore, I thought it was fantastic. But it was just classic Tottenham in terms of, I think it was about 5-10 minutes into the second half, I turned to one of my fellow journalists at the match and I just said, this isn't going to be one of those games, is it? Where Tottenham just failed to take up loads of chances and something daft happens at the end. And it was. I mean, let's talk about the match itself before we get to that handball and the controversy and everything around it. So Tottenham, a bit like last year when Newcastle came to Spurs and won 1-0. This time they had probably slightly less possession. I think it was something like 79.8% possession last year. This time it was 66%. But what Spurs did have, they hit a lot of their shots on target. Whereas last year, I think it was something, a minimal number out of the shots they had. This time they had 23 shots on goal, 12 on target, hit the woodwork twice. Carl Darlow, the Newcastle keeper, made 11 saves, which is the most by a Newcastle goalkeeper in the Premier League since 2013, November, when a certain Tim Krul made 14 saves against, you know who it is, Tottenham Hotspur. Something about Newcastle goalkeepers having man of the match performances. He was superb, especially the double save from Kane following up Lo Celso's free kick. I think it was free kick, wasn't it? And then he saved the close range header from Kane as well. There were some very good saves in there. Spurs should, don't get me wrong, Spurs should have put the game away. They had enough chances. They really should have done better in that respect. But what excited me was that they dominated and they created chances against a Newcastle team that, certainly last year were very, very organised defensively. This year they could not live with Tottenham. The penalty that Newcastle eventually got and scored in the 96th minute and 20 seconds was their first shot on target. And apparently, since Opta started collecting the data in 2006, that's the latest a first shot on target ever has resulted in a goal. Well, since 2006, since they started taking data. It's just all of these things are classic Tottenham Hotspur. It's incredible. I thought Spurs were really, really good and there were lots of players. I'll go into little kind of bits and pieces and who did well. But, I thought the defence played really well on the day. I thought Doherty had his thing. I think some people have already kind of decided on him, which is a bit weird when it was quite clearly stated he had no pre-season. Went straight off to international duty after his holidays. He's now getting fitter and fitter. I felt yesterday was the best we've seen of him so far. He was a constant menace down the right, but also defended really well. I thought Dyer and Sanchez looked absolutely fine together. No real issues. Ben Davies, I thought, with Reguilon coming in and on the bench, I thought there was a bit of pressure on him and I actually thought he did pretty well on the day. Just that moment. We can't get around it. We have to address it. The handball. It's so frustrating. After a match, when even the opposing manager, Steve Bruce, is calling it ludicrous, Andy Carroll, the guy involved in the incident from the opposing team, is tweeting about pencil jumps, that players have to now jump like that, and and he feels the pain of Eric Dyer and stuff. I think that says everything about how ridiculous the decisions are now. Eric Dyer, his arm's up, but he's turned away. He's not even, why he was turned away is perhaps something that needs to be analysed in terms of defending wise, but there was questions of offside there. There was questions of literally, about a minute before or so. Jamal Lascelles at the other end did, for me, what was probably more obvious of a handball under the new rules. It's the new rules that make such a mockery of it. It just, I think we've seen it. There's so many penalties now, and there's no even thought of intention now. That doesn't matter whether it's unintentional or not. Your arm can just be the slightest bit away from your body and you're stuffed. If it's outside the T-shirt kind of lines, as they say, you're stuffed. And VAR took 4 minutes. And the referee, had to then go over and look at the screen. And you just kind of think, wasn't the whole point of this for clear and obvious errors? The referee did not give it. The linesman did not give it. They've waited 4 minutes for someone at Stockley Park, I can't remember who the VAR ref was, to say, oh yeah, by the way, you should look at that. That would have to be a clear and obvious mistake by the referee. For me, it wasn't clear and obvious. And it's getting boring now, which is why I really don't want to go on about it too much, because it's just, my thoughts on VAR. I'm not the biggest fan of it. I think in some instances, it kind of does its job, but on the whole, it's just nitpicking at things that really would never bother to interrupt and fragment the game of football before. I'm not a fan. Let's put it that way. So yeah, the handball, Steve Bruce went on about it, so did Andy Carroll. Jan Vertonghen even weighed in over from Portugal, stating just how ridiculous it was and how the FA needs to stop hiding behind the referees. It was very strong. You can tell he's in a different country now. Mourinho was completely opposite. Mourinho would not talk about it. I asked him about it and said, but what did you actually make a decision? I'm not going to talk. I don't like to comment, because if you saw him, as soon as the penalty was scored, he was down the tunnel because he knew what was coming next. Nuno Santos, his goalkeeping coach, was among a few, went over and complained to the referee and got himself a red card. A lot of people at the time were saying it was Harry Kane. It wasn't. It was Nuno Santos. And Mourinho afterwards said, well, he's a little bit more naive than me. I knew to get straight down that tunnel. Some fans were a bit funny about that, thinking that was a bad thing, but there's a logic to what he was doing, because I think, even João Sacramento was getting angry out there, so Højbjerg having a bit of a go as well. There was so much potential for people to get red cards at a time when Spurs just can't afford to. It was, the only thing he did have was a little dig at Man United, said about, Tottenham just don't seem to get the respect we deserve. You can't, only certain teams can get decisions changed after the final whistle. Obviously referring to the Man U match at Brighton. It was a little bit prickly yesterday, but I completely understand it. I think there's times when, as a journalist, you've just got to understand the manager's going to be pretty peed off. And with every kind of right I felt yesterday, he agreed he thought his team performance was superb, just literally missing that finishing touch. That could have been wrapped up. Son hit the crossbar, hit the post, could have been wrapped up first half, and we've said that a couple of times actually this season. We mentioned Son. If you want to see Mourinho, I don't know whether he was being prickly with me so much or whether he was just utterly bewildered and frustrated at the situation, but obviously Son went off at half-time, so I asked Mourinho, so 3 questions right. I asked a couple at the start and I asked a few at the end. I just said, was that pre-planned? Did Son come off for a reason? Was that with the Tuesday, Thursday matches in mind, or was he injured? Injured. Okay. Do you expect to have him out? Will he be out missing for long? Yes. Okay. Can I ask what kind of injury it was? Hamstring. And that was it. 3 words. 1 word for each question. And he's just... we don't know the time frame yet. It may well come out while I'm doing this video or shortly after. But for me to ask, do you expect to miss him for long? And him say yes, indicates, they're looking at the normal hamstring kind of issues. Hopefully not as bad as the Harry Kane one. A lot of people saying some strange kind of conspiracy theories going on social media last night. There was that it was all made up so that Daniel Levy was made to buy a striker. as if Daniel Levy doesn't talk to his medical department and wouldn't know what's going on in his own club. There was making it sound worse to have a go at the authorities about the scheduling. You don't do that, because that's essentially, cutting off your nose to spite your face, isn't it? Because Spurs have this run of big games coming up. You don't missing your most informed player in Son. That would be madness. He's injured. And people trying to work out the exact moment. It was interesting, because where we were, we couldn't really see it either. But on Match of the Day, I watched that when I got back in late last night. And they seemed to indicate they were talking about it. You could see the grimacing on Son's face. It looked to be, I think, when he took the shot that hit the crossbar. Or just after that. It's bad news. He was absolutely flying, was absolutely in great form with Kane, and especially bearing in mind he's the only kind of not natural, but someone that you can replace Kane with up front, and he can do a job. To not have him put so much pressure now on Kane being used, or Lucas Mora. We'll come to Lucas in a little bit, because I have, unfortunately, my opinions on Lucas Moura's performance, which don't differ too much from my normal opinions on him. But let's talk about some positives before we get there. I thought Højbjerg was excellent. I thought it was his best game in the Tottenham shirt so far. I thought he was really, really good. He absolutely dominated the midfield, kept everything moving, mopped up a lot of stuff in front of the back four. And funnily enough, I wrote this I did a piece just after the game went out, and then I saw Match of the Day later on in the night. Also flagged, I think Jermaine Genius flagged him up as well. He was superb. And I thought, a guy who gets a lot of flack at the moment, Harry Winks, I thought was very good alongside him as well. I thought the two of them, in a partnership that I totally understand frustrations of when it's too defensive, but I actually felt that they dominated the midfield yesterday. And Newcastle's midfield were pretty much non-existent because of the way they patrolled the middle of that park. And they just didn't let much get by them. Hugo Lloris didn't have a save to make other than getting a hand to the penalty, but couldn't keep it out. And I think a lot of that was to do with the midfield operating so efficiently in front of the back four. I felt, who else? I thought Kane, another assist. We'll come to Kane's stats in a bit, because he's just a machine. I thought Tanguy Ndombele came on and did really well again. Absolutely, flipping a switch with that guy. He is... we can have a quick chat about it, because I don't want to go on too much about the previous games, because obviously, a lot happened since then, and the way this crazy schedule is, there'll be a lot more coming as well. So I don't want to go in the past too much, but obviously against Skriniar, Ndombele was superb. He, a bit like I was saying with Højbjerg, he was everywhere, and most importantly, from a Mourinho perspective, gave everything in the aspects that Mourinho wants. Tracking back, he made one terrific defensive clearing header. In the final seconds of the 90 minutes, he was sprinting up the pitch and setting up a chance for Lucas Moura. This is what everyone's wanting from Ndombele. There's no questioning the man's talent. He's a maverick, a beautiful player to watch when he's in possession. It was about what he does off the ball, out of possession, and that was so promising. And that was on top of the Southampton 45, where I thought he played very well. Obviously scored the winner in Plovdiv. And, and then again, I felt he came off the bench yesterday and looked really good. Mourinho's been full of praise for him. He's so happy with him. Says that he just realised the direction he was going in was not the right one. And it's brilliant. You'd assume he'll start tomorrow against Chelsea. And I just hope he keeps on going where he's going, because if he does, Tottenham are going to have the player they really... they bought someone knowing that it wasn't going to be the end product despite the fee. And I think he's now starting to give a little indication that he wants to become that end product as well, that final finished product. And he could be phenomenal. But yeah, on Ndombele, people know my thoughts on him again. I'm so delighted to see it happening for him. And I just hope it continues. It's about now being consistent and keeping up. But fitness-wise, looks leaner and sharper than he's ever looked. That 90 minutes was his first 90 minutes of the year. And I think it's only going to benefit him. And I hope he'll get another one tomorrow night, because Spurs could use a Tanguy Ndombele at the top level of fitness, dominating games with Lo Celso and Højbjerg. Oh, I'm not going to go into that midfield three, because I get a little bit overexcited when I talk about it. I probably talk about it far too much. Who else? Let's get to Lucas Moura. I can't put it off any longer. Right, Lucas Moura. If anyone's watched these videos, you know my opinion on him. incredible hard worker, tactically very disciplined, does everything Mourinho asks of him for the team, and that's why he loves him. But from an attacking sense, he just does not contribute enough. I always feel people get a little bit sucked into the kind of whole speedy winger dribbling thing. They get very excited about it, and I do too. But when you actually drill down and analyse what actually happens once those runs go on, it's just not enough. And yes, he scored yesterday. He did. You can absolutely throw that at me. He was in the right place at the right time. Really good run. Tucked it away early doors. Fair play. That's what you have to do. And that's kind of my point. That is what you have to do. And for Lucas Moura, that was the... Well, let's put it this way. Ahead of yesterday's match, Christian Eriksen had scored a goal in the Premier League more recently than Lucas Moura. Christian Eriksen, who left for Italy in January at the beginning of 2020, had scored a goal in the Premier League more recently than one of Tottenham's attacking midfielders who starts every game pretty much under Mourinho. So he scored yesterday, his first goal in 2020, Lucas Moura. And that's my issue. It's the end product. It's, for me, and he's got talent. He does. Does he use his talent in the best way? Is he the most intelligent when it comes to the use of the ball on the pitch? Probably not. Does he get his head down and run past two players and go into a third? Yes. For me, a player with that quality should be dragging players across and then looking to play the ball across. He doesn't look to cross. Yesterday, one cross and it was unsuccessful. That, for me, is a massive thing. When you've got the ability to drag a defence all over the place like Lucas does, do it, but do it in an unselfish way. Get off to the channel, bring them across and ping a ball in for the likes of Kane. Kane knows, you can see it on his face. When Lucas Moura has the ball and he goes off down the wing, this ball is not coming to me unless there's a deflection of some sort. And, you know, his passing yesterday was the lowest accuracy of the entire Tottenham team, including the subs, 75%. So that meant a quarter of all of his passes went to the opposition. And I feel bad because he scored a goal. And, you know, you want to be able to say, well done, Lucas Moura. You know, you've scored that goal, your first one of the year. But the performance around it, for me, and it sounds awful to say because, as I said, it was a great team performance. I just feel you swap Lucas Moura, you might not have got the goal, to be fair. But if you swap him, maybe, I don't know, for the second half then, I think you would have got a different... I think someone would have made more of the opportunities he had on the ball. And you kind of feel now like he's warming a spot for Gareth Bale, who will be back after the international break, midway through next month. And you feel that hopefully with Son back as well, that will be Son, Kane and Bale. And I think, unfortunately for Lucas, I think he then goes back to being the impact sub he really was under Pochettino. He's done brilliant things. The night in Amsterdam is something we'll never forget. And he scored goals in cups. He seems to have quite kind of a more of an affinity with cups. But in the Premier League, the bread and butter, it just doesn't happen. He just contributes too rarely. And for a guy, like I said, that starts pretty much every game under Mourinho, it just needs to be that bit more. I thought Bergwijn replaced Son. I don't feel he's entirely taking his chances right now. I think he needs to just rediscover a little bit of kind of the magic he had at the start. It'll come. He had a terrific season last season for PSV and for Tottenham when he came in. He just maybe he's lost his mojo slightly, just needs to work out, but that may come from confidence. That may be the fact that, you know, he feels that whatever he did, Lucas Moura was going to play the next game. It's just kind of the way it works, isn't it? So, yes, back to a positive. Harry Kane. Yes, he wasn't able to score yesterday, but he did assist another one. I just want to read you off the stats for Harry Kane. And this is why Spurs and Mourinho just cannot afford to lose him. This is the massive decision with Chelsea on Tuesday night, Maccabi Haifa on Thursday, and Man United on Sunday, is how much you play Harry Kane. Because Harry Kane is so essential to Tottenham, and he always has been. But, you know, he's scored 3 goals and laid on 5 assists in the 5 matches so far, which under Mourinho makes it a direct involvement in 23 goals in 24 matches under the Portuguese, scoring 17 and 6 assists. The guy, you know, some people said he would struggle under Jose Mourinho. That has not happened. He's been incredible. And Tottenham, they lose him as well as Son. It just becomes an utter nightmare. And Mourinho has essentially admitted, I don't, in his own words, I don't think I can fight for the Carabao Cup. EFL have essentially stuffed Tottenham by saying that they have to play this game on a Tuesday night. What team? And if Orient match had been played, that would have been 6 games that had all been played with 48-hour gaps in between. Especially at a time when players are not at their full fitness because of the circumstances and the messed up pre-season and the compacted season this time around. Of all the times, especially when you've got a gap until the quarterfinals, just push that game a little bit. It's, well, in Mourinho's word, it's showing no respect for Tottenham, so why should he show respect for the competition? For Tottenham fans, I'd imagine it's pretty gutting, bearing in mind, it was the last trophy Spurs won. What was it, 12 years ago? So no fan wants to see their club throwing the competition, although I do see some suggest it on social media. But I kind of understand where he's coming from. He's not going to be able to pick a strong team. He's going to have to essentially mix it up, use pretty much everyone that didn't play yesterday. Sissoko was a late withdrawal from the bench because he had a bit of a headache and migraine. I could see him at half-time eating a packet of crisps with Gareth Bale in the box, the executive box. So hopefully nothing too serious. And you'd imagine he'll start tomorrow. I mean, I suppose you could argue Spurs' bloated squad as it is now, which is weird, bearing in mind where Spurs have come from, and the squad that was not strong before. They probably can put out a half-decent team still tomorrow. But as Mourinho said, the issue is dynamics and rhythm, and Pochettino used to say this as well. It's all very well saying make 11 changes, but you still have to get the blend of players right and the patterns and the way they play together and who fits into what system. He was quite defeatist. He kind of said, look, I've got to prioritise Thursday night in Europa League because that brings in money. And it's a competition that we feel we can get to the knockout stages. I think just for getting to the group stages alone, I think you get about 15 million, something around that. I don't know if that's including TV money or not, or it's just like the prize money involved and things like that. So Tottenham, we know, are looking for money, especially for the transfer window as well, which we'll come to in a little bit. So I kind of see where he's coming from again. And obviously the Europa League is a pathway to the Champions League as well. Because the Carabao Cup, they've pretty much stuffed Tottenham. I'll be there again tomorrow night, but it's going to be very interesting to see who he puts out. And it's the old cliche, it's a chance for players to make a name for themselves. Because if Spurs can come through this week with the amount of games they've got, with a positive kind of outcome from the week, they've done incredibly well. And if they don't, Mourinho's going to have the excuses lined up. And to be fair, they're valid excuses. So let's go on to the transfer window. We've whinged and moaned and praised quite enough. 7 days left, I believe it is, until the end of the main transfer window. And then you've got the EFL bonus window, where Premier League clubs and EFL clubs can work together on their own deals between themselves, which obviously you'd think we'll see various youngsters go out on loan. And potentially, although I think it would be difficult to do, Premier League clubs, I guess, I'm pretty sure they can buy. I think they can buy or loan from EFL clubs. I have to doubly check that one out before I state that as a fact. So, 7 days to go. If you've watched these before, you know there's 2 positions they're trying to fill. It's been a very good transfer window. It would be such a shame if not getting these 2 last pieces of the puzzle, as Mourinho keeps calling it, would kind of deflect from the fact, a bit like the handball yesterday, deflecting from a very good team performance. It would be such a shame if not getting the striker after 3 transfer windows of trying to get one would really deflect from what's been a terrific window with Højbjerg, Hart, Doherty, Bale, Reguilon. They're 5 perfect signings, fitting the roles, fixing problems, 4 of them coming straight into the starting 11 and really improving Mourinho's team. But these last 2 positions, especially the striker, are so vital. Mourinho, as I understand it, is getting a little bit frustrated behind the scenes, a bit more vocal, especially about the striker and wanting to get that done. And you can understand it because now, it's one of those I told you so moments, isn't it? Son out. You can see why he's frustrated, because this would be the scenario where you'd have the new striker in and you'd have him ready and raring to go for at least 1 or 2 of these cup matches coming up. Yes, Tottenham have had the issue, I'm not going to go into it too much, of the Harry Kane presence. They've they've made inquiries for so many strikers this window, but they've either run into the player not wanting to come because of Kane, knowing that they're a first team starter where they are, and they're not going to be that at Tottenham. They've had clubs that don't want to sell, and they've had, certain players that maybe just don't quite meet the requirements of both club and Mourinho. Because, if Spurs don't buy a player that Mourinho wants or fits the mould that he wants, he won't play him. I do wonder personally whether Bergwijn, he was really excited about him to begin with, but admitted clearly that he was not his first choice. And I do wonder whether now that's why we're not seeing Bergwijn starting every game, because he was not the player that Mourinho wanted. I may be being too harsh, but hopefully he can mould him into the player he wants, because I think he's an incredibly talented young player. So Spurs don't want to do that. Bring a striker in who actually is not going to be what they want, and Mourinho ends up moaning about and not using. They've inquired about so many players. They've inquired about Danny Ings, who we know is just pretty much going to be a non-starter because of Southampton's attitude. And I don't think Ings would want to, move to a club where he's not going to play as much. He's on fire at Southampton. Andrea Bellotti at Torino was another one that they inquired about. Torino captain. Again, massive money. Torino not really willing to sell him. Patson Daka at RB Salzburg, a young player. They went the other way, looked at someone that's an emerging talent. Player doesn't want to leave Austria right now and probably won't get the game time. And the other thing we've got to remember is Bale coming in decreases the likelihood of Spurs playing with two strikers up front. It's just all these little interconnecting things as well. So you've got Habib Diallo from Metz, the Benfica duo of Carlos Vincius and Haris Severovic. Oh man, if someone could teach me pronunciations, I'd be such a better person at doing these. Those three technically are still on the table. They're ones that are being looked at. But you do wonder whether, and it sounds awful to say, whether they're almost like backup options, where there's others they've wanted and just can't get, and they'll maybe circle all the way back around to these guys, potentially on loan. Ideally, Spurs want to do a loan to buy. That is their ideal thing. They've, spent a fair whack of money now, relatively, for Tottenham. Yes, it's nowhere near the Chelsea money, but I'd say Spurs have had a big transfer window in who they've brought in. But they need to sell. They need to sell Rose. Foyth pretty much needs to go out the door now. Cameron Carter-Vickers, either a loan or a permanent move. They want to loan out Ryan Sessegnon now. Having brought in Reguilon and Bale, there's no room really for Sessegnon, but they have high hopes for him for the future. They want him to go out and get first-team football. And as I understand it, there's a load of Premier League clubs and teams across Europe that want to bring him in. They'll try and get him playing at left-back wherever he goes. Because there's a fair few clubs involved, they should be able to get a bit of an auction and a decent loan fee in. But it's about getting it done, get these players out the door, get the money in. You've got to make decisions on Sergio Aurier and Paolo Gazzaniga. If you get offers for them, are you going to let them go? With Aurier, does that mean you bring in another right back? Gazzaniga, the same. Do you bring in another keeper, or do you let Alfie Whiteman and Brandon Austin come in? Spurs need to... They've just massively stalled on players getting out the door. Only Carl Walker-Peters, really, is the only one that's gone out the door and brought some money in. And that's why they're struggling. They need more funds. That's limiting them to loaning, because they're just... I think there's a fear that they'll they'll buy a player in and then not be able to sell, and they're going to leave themselves in a massive deficit and real issues because they feel financially they're in a bit of a... Well, let's say they're struggling, as all clubs are with this year and everything, and the lack of income. And now we know that fans aren't going to be back in stadiums next month by the looks of it. So all the clubs, I think, are panicking now that, oh crikey, the income that we maybe were expecting October is now gone as well. And they're being so much more cautious when it comes to stuff like that. You've also got Milik, the Napoli striker. Milik's a strange one. I get asked about him regularly because if you look in the media, Milik is being offered to any club pretty much going. He was meant to go to Roma, and then it all collapsed very late on. There was lots of speculation of why it collapsed. And I think since that moment, there's been a lot of clubs have been offered him. And Spurs, as I understand it, are very undecided over a move for him now. Yeah, it's a strange situation there, and I can understand people just want him to come, but I think maybe have a little closer look at that scenario and that situation, and ask yourselves why he's now being touted for so many different clubs, and then we'll see what happens. Spurs. Who knows? Spurs may circle back around, like I say, and look at him again, but very much undecided from what I was hearing on him. Um, and yeah, we'll see whether all the stuff on that kind of emerges as things go on. Weghorst as well, the Wolfsburg one was the one that I think the Dutch media got quite excited about and it was about to sign, and I think from everything I can gather that was all more agent stuff trying to push his claims to get him a decent move, but it wasn't going to be to Tottenham. And this is the other issue at this time of the year is that agents are on full alert trying to increase interest in their clients or even get them new contracts. And it's totally understandable. That's part of their job. But it does kind of create this almost like a fog of war, as it were, around transfer deals and stuff that isn't really going to happen is touted as suddenly about to happen. And obviously it doesn't materialise. And also it works the other way, is that the fans actually kind of get more desperate, and it's understandable. But I do think, and I do the same myself. You start getting excited about a player that you've never seen actually play. You've probably either seen him, I don't know, in a computer game like a FIFA or Football Manager, or you see him in a YouTube compilation, and he's suddenly the best thing ever. And strikers, for instance, who have got goal records that you wouldn't even take a second look at normally, suddenly become the answer. We need to get them in, announce, blah blah, whoever. Yeah, we all get a little bit desperate, and I think Tottenham's priority has always been not to panic by. 3 transfer windows. You could have at least made a calm by now of a striker. You see, this is my biggest problem with the striker situation is I can understand the problems. I can understand having various targets. I can even slightly understand the almost scattergun approach of inquiring about so many strikers this window. But what I can't understand is after a year, I don't think they'll get to the end of this window without signing a striker. And I think that's probably because, as I think I've said before, don't sign a striker in one window. That's unfortunate. Don't sign a striker in the second window. That's careless. Not to sign a striker in a third window after a year. That is negligent. And I just can't see Tottenham getting to that stage of doing that. Do I think it probably should have been wrapped up earlier? Of course, but this is Tottenham, and they seem to have got a lot of the other deals prioritised and done quickly. A lot of those players, were players, other than probably Joe Hart, were players that they'd identified and wanted to go for, made their move, made it happen. And whereas with the striker one, they're leaving it late, and it's almost like waiting for a decent opportunity to arise. But the problem is waiting, you also get into that desperation zone. And then that's when you end up circling around to, I don't know, like Josh King. Josh King isn't someone that they've had as a target this summer at all. But from what I understand, he hasn't been entirely ruled out because, he qualifies as homegrown, 9 months left in his contract, could be a cheap deal to pick up at the end of the window. Does he actually solve anything at Tottenham? Not really, because he's not a natural striker. He's more of a support striker, or he plays out wide. This is the thing with the Son injury. Yes, it's an enormous pain in the backside to lose such an informed player who can also fill in for Kane. But in terms of his main position in the squad, it's not an area you need to replace. Spurs don't need a winger. Spurs have got, Lucas, Lamela, Bale now. Technically, Sessegnon, is there as well. Ali can play there as well. Bergwijn. There are so many options. That's not an issue there. But they can't get to the end of this window without striker. Just talk briefly about centre back. Obviously, one very clear target they've got, Milan Skriniar. As I understand it, Spurs, have been told the price from Inter Milan is £45 million. Tottenham really only willing to go up to 32 million with add-ons to try and kind of make it more enticing. Player wants to come to Tottenham, wants to link up with Mourinho. Strange situation for him. It was first choice for Inter for much of last season until the restart. After the restart, Conte just didn't really seem to fancy him. There's been a bit of posturing in the last couple of days. We've seen the technical performance director of Spurs, Steve Hitchen, was over there trying to do a deal for him. Spurs offered various players, including Juan Foyth, as part of the deal. And then we kind of saw this posturing this weekend. The sporting director came out and said, he's not for sale. Then Antonio Conte came out after their match and went, he's not for sale, but we could kind of do with a bit of money for our own transfers. So it was all very much, pay our money, pay their price tag or you're not getting him. That's not closed off at this moment. Spurs will keep going on that. Am I certain it will go through? It's Tottenham Hotspur and it's the last week of the transfer window. There's absolutely no certainty that anything goes through. I think Spurs will try and make it happen. It's the defender that Mourinho wants. Personally, I prefer they sorted out the striker first. But, I think Mourinho really sees this Slovakian Skriniar, 25-year-old, as a first-choice defender who can play on the left of the back two as well. Sees him as an important kind of player that he can bring in. A Mourinho player, as it were. They looked at Ruben Dias, and I think, as I said before, price rate just was silly. We can see Man City looking like they're going to move for him now. I think the deal's something like £60 million in all, which is nowhere in Spurs' ballpark. Like I say, they're looking for 32 million. That's half of that. Ruben Dias, terrific young player, but Tottenham never really in the running for him. So we shall see. The final week of the window. I'll try and do some more of these when I can. Obviously, it's a mad week. Matches galore. A press conference on Wednesday ahead of the Europa League as well. And then obviously making the trip to Manchester on Sunday as well. It doesn't stop. Don't get me wrong. I'm not going to complain because after lockdown, when it was so pants and we were, myself, I was trying to essentially write about football that didn't exist. I'm certainly not complaining now about how manic it is. But like I say, get that striker done, Tottenham. Get that centre-back in if he's what Mourinho wants. And then, to be honest, arguably they've had the best transfer window out there. If you don't bring in the striker, it just means this wonderful transfer window of activity just has this big gaping hole. Because if you don't have a replacement for Kane at the top of the pitch, it's just all it's all for nothing almost, isn't it? You're creating a great platform, but without someone firing the bullets at the top. Let's hope they get it done. I'll try and bring any updates I can over the coming days. Like I say, Skriniar, they're going to keep trying for it. It's all about compromise now. Almost like a who blinks first, really, scenario. Spurs are used to dealing with Inter. They did it over Ericsson. They dealt with him over on Dembele earlier this summer, obviously. Wouldn't let him go. And now thankfully they didn't, because I think we're really going to see him. As I said, Dele Alli left out again. Third game out of 4. He's been left out of the matchday squad. Spurs and Mourinho still stating that he's not leaving the club. Be interesting to see whether that is shaken late in the window, if there's any opportunities of swap deals. I think more alone for Dele Alli. I'd be stunned if he left permanently. But hey, Mourinho and Spurs are saying he's not going anywhere. We have to take them for their word on that. I was trying to think if there's any other little bits and pieces. I think that's it. Like I say, people with dreams of another creative midfielder, unless there's a sudden opportunity that arises in the market they cannot say no to, they're not really looking for an attacking midfielder. It's a bit like Reguilon, though. If you're going to pin your hopes on anything, they were not going to look for a left-back in this window, but they said, and I'd heard this quite early on, I remember writing about it, I think I said it in videos, if Reguilon came onto the market at a reasonable price, they were always going to have a look because he's a player they looked at for a long time. And I think if that's the case with central midfielder, attacking midfielder, maybe. But for me, it's all about the striker and the centre-back. Please get it done, Tottenham. Because I don't want to be doing another one of these in a week's time saying, oh my God, I can't believe they didn't do it. And the Spurs fans will be just as frustrated. So, keep an eye out for more videos. I'll try and do another one before, if I can squeeze it in somewhere before the possibly next weekend, maybe next Saturday, before we get to the real crunch days of the transfer window. And match tomorrow, match Thursday, match Sunday. They keep on coming. So hope you enjoy them. Hope you enjoyed this. Stay safe, stay healthy, and I shall talk to you later. Bye.